Breed choice, another thing to think about if you're thinking about getting into cattle. Some people will pick breeds based on what they like. Some people will pick breeds based on what's best for the climate. Some people will pick breeds just what's available. Some main points with breeds is that you do need to make sure that the breed you're picking is suitable to the climate you're in. You wouldn't want to take highland cattle and put them somewhere where in Arizona where the temperatures get up to 100 and some degrees. They're too hairy. It's not a good idea for the animals or for you. Same thing, black animals in very hot heat can be bad. I mean, they've survived. A lot of these cattle are pretty durable, but again, they're not going to put on weight as good, and that's going to affect your bottom line if you're selling for meat, or the size of your animals if you're selling them into market. I know a lot of people in hot climates will use white animals or red animals, as those do a lot better in the heat. If you're in one of the colder states, then highlands or something like that are going to work for you. And I'm just using highlands as an example because they're super hairy and they're kind of the extreme of animals with hair. But breed is a big factor, and again, depends on what you want to do with your animals. You also have them divided into beef cattle, and then you have dairy cattle. And dairy cattle aren't going to produce the greatest beef, vice versa. Beef cattle aren't going to produce the greatest milk if that's what you're going for. Something to think about is, what do you want to do with your cattle? And I would even try to think out what's your long-term plan, because again, with cattle, they're not like chickens or pigs where you can raise them out 8 months, 6 months, they're ready to go. Cattle can take a long time to get where you want. Some popular breeds, if you're raising for beef, are Angus. There are Hereford. There are Angus Hereford crosses, and those produce some amazing beef. That's just what you see a lot of the common animals. Again, depending on where you're at, that could be different. Here in Virginia, that's mostly what we see. There's also South Pole Murray Grey. There's a lot of different beef animals that you can get that are good on grass. One thing I will caution you on, if you're getting cattle for beef and you're doing grass fed, is make sure it's not coming from a big commercial operation. A lot of those cattle just genetically are bred to fatten on grain, and you take some of those cattle out of that system and you try to just put them on grass and fatten them on grass, they're not going to do great. If you can find cattle that have been doing well on grass and are pretty much grass fed from a lineage standpoint, then I think that's the way to go, in that you'll get better weight gains, which means better profit for you, whether you're selling them into the market or farm to table. You also have some of the smaller heritage breeds. Low-line Angus, some of these belted Galloways that you see on our property are fairly small. You have miniature Herefords. You have to think about what you're going to use the animals for. If these are breeding, obviously a miniature bull may have trouble with a full-size cow. You do not want to breed a full-sized bull to a small breed cow. That can be dangerous. They can have a big calf that either won't come out or is going to have a lot of problems. And we had that happen where we purchased some low-line Angus from a gentleman. We got a good deal on it, probably too good of a deal, and I should have known probably something was up. Anyways, we knew they had been exposed, but we were under the impression it was just to another low-line bull. And when we picked up the animals, we noticed that they had a pretty full-size looking Hereford Angus cross and had a lot of white in it. And of course, when the baby came out, there was a ton of white. Breeding a genetically large animal to a genetically small animal means that the baby could be large, too large for that genetically small mama cow. And that's where you run into problems. I should have questioned, and I didn't. This was our first group of cattle we had bought. And anyways, one of our moms had a calf and it had a lot of white in it, which you wouldn't expect from two black low-line Angus bull cow. And long story short, about a week later, the mom died. And we kept a good eye on her. We didn't notice any bleeding. She was feeding the baby. Everything looked good. And then just one day we found her dead. So live and learn. But make sure if you're buying bred animals, especially if they're smaller breed genetic animals, make sure they haven't been bred any large animals, because that's a recipe for disaster and just a mistake that we learned from on our farm early on. Pasture size and management is another thing to consider when deciding if you're going to buy cattle or not, or what kind of cattle to buy, or how many to buy. First, the size of your pasture matters. A rough rule of thumb is 2 acres per head. Again, this is there is really no rule of thumb, I should say that. It depends on what your climate's like. It depends on the type of pasture you have, how fast it's growing. It depends on the size of your animals. It depends on the breed. It depends on if it's a steer versus a feeding mother. All of those things come into effect, and you could get by with 1/2 acre per head, or you may need 3 acres per head. Also in Virginia, grass grows great here. Some places they may not have as good a grass, so they have much larger areas, much more acres per head than what you have. So that's not really a question you can answer, and that's something you're going to have to sort of figure out for yourself. I recommend starting out conservative. So if you have 10 acres, get 2 head. Get 2 head of cattle and just see how they do. If you're rotating them around, see how the grass is doing, see how much grass you have, are you keeping up or not? And that'll kind of tell you, okay, I can add a couple more in and to get a good feel for it. What you don't want to do is get too many animals on the land. One, it's not good for the pasture. Cattle love to go for the new grass, so they will eat a swath and then they will go back, and rather than eat the other tall stuff that's there, they're going to go back for that stuff they had just eaten a couple days ago. Yes, that's a cow pooping behind me if you hear the pats, or behind the camera. They will eat that young grass, and they will keep eating that young grass to the point where that young grass has a lot of trouble growing back. But the briars, the broccoli, I'll say, the stuff that they don't want to eat is still going to be there. And over time, that can really ruin your pastures because they've eaten out all the good stuff and you're left with stuff that's not that great. That's the point of rotational grazing, is that you let them eat on it. They get kind of one pass at everything, and then you move them to another area, whether that's with a rope line, whether that's with actual paddocks and fencing. But you keep them from going back for that second bite. What this does is kind of like if you mow your lawn. If you think about mowing your lawn, you mow it, week and a half later, you got to mow it again. 2 weeks later, got to mow it again. And you have to do that pretty much throughout the summer, at least here in Virginia. Where if you didn't mow it, it would grow and grow and grow, but it would kind of get to a point and it would stop growing. So you think about that over the course of a year. You're moving those cattle, they're mowing, then you're putting them in another spot. That allows that grass to come up really quick so that when you get them back there, there's a lot more grass there. By the end of the year, if you think about how tall grass can get, where you were rotating them may have gotten way up here in successive feedings, where not rotating them and let them eat the young stuff, it may have just grown to here. And when you look at it from a biomass standpoint, or how much grass you've produced for that year, your management comes down to that. And you can produce a lot more grass if you can rotate them. Now, the downside of that is rotating is a lot of work. You have to move lines. You have to be out here every couple days in the fields, reeling them up, stretching them back out, and it can be a lot of work. If you don't have a watering system that you're rotating around, then you're moving a whole watering system, which can be a pain. So then you have to factor in your labor cost. What you don't want to do is get too many head of animals and then you're buying in extra hay. That is just not profitable, and you're just going to be spending money, and I'm trying to help you hopefully prevent that from happening. So our grazing pattern here at Long Bottom Farm, we try to do about 2 to 3 days. Set it up where we have stationary waters and we kind of do a wagon spoke around those waters. Try to, again, get 2 or 3 days. If I know that my part-time job that I'm going to be off and then I've got something the next day, and just depending on what the calendar looks like, I may set it up for 4 or 5 days. Sometimes if I'm off the whole week and I just want to hang out with the cattle and do stuff, I may set them up for 1 or 2 days. It just depends on the weather. If you're getting a lot of rain, they're going to tear an area up quickly, so I try to move them a little more frequently. And then if you're in a drought, you may keep them somewhere longer because you don't have so much grass to go around. So it really depends on your weather, your animals, and it's just something you have to get out there and do and learn for yourself. You're going to make mistakes. That's okay. That's how you learn. Mistakes are really just lessons. You learn that lesson, take it with you. Don't make the same mistake again. Make new mistakes. And that's how you get better as a cattleman and a rancher, and learning how to raise animals is just by doing. There's so many videos out there. There's so many opinions on how to do this, how to rotate pasture, what breeds to get, what size animals, how many per acre. And it really comes down to you get out there, do it in your context, see what works, see what doesn't. That's the simplest way I can put it. Take some of the knowledge from these videos. I mean, they'll help you to a degree, but at a point, the videos stop working, and then it's just experience, and you just have to learn. And to me, that's the fun part of farming, is you're always figuring it out. You're figuring out better ways to feed your animals. You're figuring out better ways to save money. You're figuring out better ways to take care of the land. You know, I'm not an engineer, but I can see why engineers are drawn to farming, because it's problem solving. It's figuring out how all these systems work together to promote healthier animals and to hopefully boost your bottom line. All right, the cattle have quieted down, and the video is getting a little longer than I wanted to, so let's jump into the last couple areas real quick. Steers versus breeding cows. Again, depends on what you're going to do. If you're raising for meat, get steers. If you want to do breeding, in my opinion, that's a lot more work. You might want to consider having squeeze chutes and stuff. You can have problems. I would not recommend starting out with redback cows, cow-calf pairs, or anything like that. I'd recommend just getting a few steers or even a few cull cows. And by cull cows, I don't mean, 10-year-old, 15-year-old. I mean, a lot of farmers will get rid of their heifers or cows if they don't have a baby on a certain cycle. If they don't take in a certain time, you can get these at 2 to 3 years old, and they're just as good as the steers. They might be a little smaller, but they do great if you're doing it from a farm to table production standpoint. Stay away from bred cattle, steers, cull cows if this is your first go at it. Health and vet care. That can be costly. We really haven't had to do a lot with the vet. Some things I do recommend is, one, we do rotationally graze. We're grass-fed, grass-finished. We don't use any grain, but I do believe in vaccination. And I don't mean all vaccinations. I know there's mRNA vaccinations and these or that. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about this soil in Virginia has blackleg in it. The farmer that I bought this farm from has told me he's lost cow to blackleg, and that's a bacteria that's in the soil. And no matter how good pasture management I do, I'm my cattle are going to be exposed to that. And I want to take care of my cattle, and I know that this vaccine will prevent them from getting blackleg. So we do give our cattle vaccinations for blackleg. I recommend you look at your area, see what they're at risk for, and if it's a very common thing and it's a vaccine that's been out for 20, 30, 40, 50 years, go for it. This is your decision. I'm telling you what works for us and what I do to manage my cattle. I can give you recommendations. If you decide not to vaccinate, that may work in some cases, but I usually say it works until it doesn't. Blackleg can kill an animal in less than 24 hours, and it can kill a lot of them. Just something I recommend is look in your area, consider vaccinations. We don't use antibiotics routinely. We don't put antibiotic feed. The only time we use antibiotics is if an animal's sick, and then we actually take that animal out of our production. So we'll sell it into another farmer who wants it. Anyways, we don't sell it to our customers. Probably not a lot wrong with if you treat an animal once for 7 days with an antibiotic. That comes from there is a lot when animals are put in feedlots and they're on antibiotics for a couple months because the conditions are so horrid that they need antibiotics to prevent getting sick. If you're treating an animal that gets sick, sometimes pink eye, sometimes things happen, a hoof injury, that's what you got to do as a good farmer. As practicing good animal husbandry, I'm not going to let my animals suffer because I believe vaccinations are the devil or because this or that. I want to take good care of my animals, but again, to be honest with our customers, again, we will sell that animal either to the sale barn or something else, and it doesn't go into our food production system. So that's kind of how we deal with that, being grass-fed, grass-finished, and no antibiotics. That's how we can tell our customers that, is that if we have to give an animal antibiotics, it comes out of production and goes somewhere else. That said, I do recommend having a vet, at least do some research. Even if you don't need them, good to have them on speed dial. It's good to know who the good big animal vets are, because that's one thing when you're needing a vet badly or there's an emergency, trying to find one is kind of a pain. So just having them right there, talk to other farmers, talk to locals, and they'll be able to tell you who the good vets are. Raising animals requires time, some more than others. I would say on our farm, we raise chickens. Those are our most labor intensive, and that's egg and broilers. We have to move shelters every day. We have to feed every day. We have to get eggs every day. We have to wash them every day. A lot of work there. Pigs, I can kind of set those up. I would say they're mid. I can set those up where I don't have to do anything for a couple days to a week. That's with big waters, big troughs, and having them in a system where we don't really have to move them. And then our cattle are probably our least labor-intensive animal, but they do require daily attention. Meaning, if you're rotating, again, every 2 to 3 days, we have to move lines. If you don't have in-ground waters, then you're going to have to move that water, and that could take a few hours to do all that. If you're rotating more frequently, could be more labor, depending on how you're rotating them. Again, pretty much all of our pastures are connected, but you may have to get them from one pasture to another, and that could be through a trailer getting them there. Again, another cost if you're going to raise cattle, you need a trailer and a truck that can pull it. Again, I guess not a need, but I think you're going to do it enough if your plan is to get into cattle, that you're going to be going to pick up cattle, you're going to be taking them to the processor, you're going to be bringing in new cattle. To me, we've been doing this now for 8 years and 7 or 8 trips a year, up and back. And not only that, we use it for our pigs, we use it for our horses, so a trailer was a no-brainer for us. Maybe different in your context, just something to think about. Anyways, I digress. Time management, again, if you have a full-time job and you're working, Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, then you got to think about, are you going to get out here in the morning before you go to work and do stuff? Are you going to do it in the evenings? And which days are you going to do that on? Also, having cattle, having animals in general, I'm sure you're aware, sometimes it'll tie you to the farm, meaning you can't just up and leave. You go on a week vacation. If you can get somebody to watch them, great, and there are farm sitters. When it comes to all the animals, cattle are the easiest, and we've took long vacations, where I'd say 7 days, where we'll have a farm sitter, but we'll set our cattle up just to have a huge pasture so they don't have to do anything. They have their in-ground water, they have plenty of grass, they're good to go. Just think about what your plan is with your cattle and how much time that's going to entail, and how can you work that time into your current schedule, whether that be with your job, your family, and just make sure that time's available so that you can take good care of the animals. Infrastructure and equipment. This can vary greatly. We went probably 4 years without a squeeze chute. You can see this video up here. We just built our lane squeeze chute and everything's set up now. Super happy with it. We've ran one group through it and it's worked great. For our first couple years though, we really didn't need it. And that's because if a cow or a steer or whoever had a problem where we had to castrate even a small bull, we could typically get a rope around, get it around a post, and then pin them in with a gate. And as long as they weren't too big. And that's typically how we've done it if we weren't able to ban them as babies. We do have babies sometimes. We don't typically breed on this farm, but we do sometimes buy bred back cows. A squeeze chute is something you may or may not need. Again, I think you can get away if you're just doing a couple head and your first couple years, you can definitely get away without one. Having one makes life easier for tagging, for vaccinating, for doing the things that you need to do. Definitely makes life easier pinning them around a gate is not fun. And it can be dangerous. So that's something you have to think about. Tractor, if you're going to move big bales of hay, you're going to need a tractor. Now, actually, I take that back. You can do it. We do it two ways. We have our tractor, which I need because we bale hay as well. But we also have the Greg Judy bale and roller, which is pretty great. Unless it's a really wet year, then they step in half of it. And again, it goes into the soil, so it actually does great for the pasture. But I find that I end up having to feed more hay because they're messing up more hay. We're going to put in fence feeders this year, which are basically slots within a fence that go into the pasture, and then you put your bales of hay into that slot, shut a gate, and that way I have basically a sacrifice area where the cattle can eat from to help hopefully protect the pastures a little bit better and make it easier for me to feed the cattle. That way I'm doing it all in one, and I can put out about 2 or 3 bales at a time without worrying about them stepping on it. Again, we'll probably use our Greg Judy bale and roller some because there's just areas I have bald spots. So when that happens from where we move these big sleds, I'll definitely put some hay over that during the year. It just helps to grow the grass back. And there's areas that if I'm trying to help the pastures a little bit, I'll definitely roll it out versus let the cattle eat in one spot. Cattle, if they eat in one spot, their hooves just over time will tear stuff up. If you're using those round feeders and putting a bale of hay in there, just something to think about. You might want to move that around, or just pick a sacrifice area and just say, this ain't gonna grow good pasture, and let them eat there. I think that's probably the best way. Moving it around still works, but like if it's been rainy or snowy, even one day is gonna tear that area up. So I recommend just doing a sacrifice area if you're gonna do that kind of system. And then again, if you're doing the Greg Judy system, just unrolling the bales, then do it in different areas so it kind of spreads the cattle out. Talked about a trailer. Depending on how much you're going to be hauling animals back and forth, how many cattle you're going to have. Do you have other animals like pigs, horses that could use that trailer? That may be something you'll need. And again, you'll need a truck to pull that. And in some circumstances, if you're only going to go to the processor once or twice a year and you've got just cattle, then that may be something you just hire out. There are services that will come pick your cattle up, take them, and do whatever you need. And they're not cheap, but if you're doing it once or twice a year, it may be more economical than actually buying a trailer, paying taxes on that trailer, and everything else that goes along with that. And real quick, a lot of farm equipment you can exclude from taxes. You have to talk to your tax professional on that. Some you can't, depending on what you're using it for. Varies from area to area. Won't get into that big discussion, but just look at everything that you're buying. A lot of states will allow you to write that off as farm equipment, and you don't have to pay taxes on it. So is raising cattle worth it for you? For me, yes. These are my favorite animals on the farm. These are, I think they have personality. All cattle will be a little bit different. Some will get out sometimes. I'll link to a short below we did where one got out. The thing about cattle is they're typically not going to go far if they get out. So it's usually pretty easy to get back in. Something I recommend is train them to a bucket. You may have heard farmers say that, and that's where we use alfalfa pellets. That way we stay within grass-fed, grass-finished only. We shake that and say, "Here, boss." I usually start mooing when I do that. "Here, boss." And that's usually their call. I'm going to give them some pellets here in a minute. That's usually their call that'll get them to come. And when I need to move them from a pasture, I can shake that bucket. They'll learn to do that with lines. If they get out, I can easily use a bucket to get them back in. It's an insurance policy for you. So train them to a bucket every day, every couple days. Go out there, give them, you can feed them on troughs, or you just throw it right on the ground. Again, we use alfalfa pellets. I don't think there's a big harm in using grain if you're using it just for training treats. Again, I think that could be abused in that you're saying you're grass-fed, but you're feeding them grain every day through a bucket, and it's only 2 head. Okay, it could get a little gray area there. But for that reason, we don't use any grains whatsoever. We just use alfalfa pellets, and that's permissible as grass-fed, grass-finished, and the cattle love it. So leave me some comments below if you have questions. I'll answer them. Hopefully some more other experienced guys or girls are in here that have been doing cattle for a while, and they can tell you their experiences. Everyone's had different experiences. Everyone has different opinions on this, and there's not a right or wrong. Like I say, get out there, get you a couple head and go for it. You'll learn from experience, and I think you'll definitely find if you have the room and you can get the infrastructure, cattle are definitely worth it. And I didn't mention it in the video, but if you want to see, we use minerals for our cattle. All soils are deficient in minerals. We're very deficient in selenium and some other minerals. All cattle need minerals. If you want to see more about what minerals we use, how we feed them to our cattle, check out this video here, and we'll catch you in the next one.